this video, we're going to be finding the LCM, or least common multiple, between two fractions in order to find equivalent fractions. But before we dive in, let's review what is a multiple. So a multiple is when you multiply a number by each corresponding number. That sounded a little much, but let's review. Let's say I'm going to do the multiples of 4. I know that 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times 5 is 20. 4 times 6 is 24. 4 times 7 is 28. 4 times 8 is 32. And 4 times 9 is 36. And 4 times 10 is 40. So I've listed out the first 10 multiples of 4. That's what we're going to be doing today, but for two different numbers. In order to find the least common multiple between two numbers, remember that common means the same, we're going to analyze two different numbers. So let's say we take the number 9 and 12. We would draw a T-chart for 9 and 12 and write out the first several multiples of each number. So let's say I'm writing out my multiples for 9. I'm going to get to 36 and think, that sounds familiar. So over here, we're going to have 12, 24, 36. My common multiple between the two is that 36. Whenever you're writing out your multiples, make sure you put that first number is the same number. So that 12 is here because 12 times 1 is 12. 12 times 2 is 24. That'll make it easier later on when we're counting up what number that multiple is. Now that we understand how we're going to find it, let's dive into the first problem. So our I can for the day, make sure you remember, is I can find the least common multiple of two fractions. Our first fractions are 2/3 and 1/6. So let's go ahead and write these in our T-chart. Remember, when we're doing this, we're looking for denominators, not the numerators. We don't care about those right now. So go ahead and put your denominator numbers at the top of your T-chart, 3 on one side, 6 on the other. And let's write out the first couple multiples of each one. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. That's probably good for this one. Now let's write out the first couple multiples of 6. 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 3 is 18. I hope you caught that we already have our common multiple. Our common multiple between 3 and 6 is 6. Go ahead and circle those so you know which one you have. So we know that the least common multiple, I'm going to go ahead and write it right here. My LCM is 6. Go ahead and write that in your notes. Your LCM, your least common multiple, is 6. Now remember, that's our least common multiple. There are other common multiples between these two numbers. If I kept going, I could say 3 times 4 is 12. 12 is also a common multiple. And, we could use it, but for this, we want to find the least common multiple. When you start choosing bigger numbers, you can end up with crazy big numbers. I could keep going and we would eventually get to 18. 18 is also a common multiple, but oh my goodness, our numbers would be huge. We want to take the least common multiple so that we can make our numbers a little bit smaller. All right, so we know our least common multiple is 6. I'm going to go down here. Come with me. We are going to write our 2/3 and our 1/6. Now my job is to figure out, I want to take my 2/3 and turn it into a fraction with a 6 as my denominator because that's my least common multiple. So I have to think in my brain, how can I get from 3 to 6? I know that I can multiply times 2 to get from 3 to 6. Okay, but if I multiply the denominator times 2, I also have to multiply the numerator times 2. But I'm sure you're like, but Ms. Wilson, how is it the same if you multiply it? What does 2 over 2 equal? Remember, 2 over 2 equals 1. So I'm basically just multiplying this 2/3 times 1 to get another number just to change the denominator. This is why they are equivalent fractions. Remember, equivalent means the same. So we're going to create equivalent fractions by multiplying numbers times 1, even though that 1 looks like a fraction. So we know 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 2 is 4. The most important thing to remember is that if you multiply the denominator by a number, you also have to multiply the numerator by the exact same number. Otherwise, you're not multiplying it by 1 and it's not equal anymore. Let's remind ourselves that 2/3 is equal to 4/6. Let's say I have a pizza and we break it into thirds and you eat 2/3 of it. That same pizza, if we had broken it into sixths, and you had eaten, that's kind of a messy break apart, sorry, and you had eaten 4/6 of it, 1, 2, 3, 4, that equals 2/3. All we did was multiply it by 1. Made it look a little different. Let's move on to the 1/6. As you can see, your 1/6, the denominator is already 6. So I multiply that 6 times 1 to get 6, 1 times 1 to keep it at 1. We didn't have to change that one because our least common multiple was one of our denominators. But that's going to be different for probably the rest of the problems. Let's go ahead and dive into the next one. We've got 1/3 and 5/8. So we're going to go ahead and do our t-chart. 3 and 8, we take our denominators, put them on the t-chart. Then we solve that t-chart. We're going to find the first several multiples. So I've got 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 4 is 12. 3 times 5 is 15. 3 times 6 is 18. 3 times 7 is, sorry, my brain just died there for a second, 21. And 3 times 8 is 24. I'm going to stop there because I'm running out of room. Hopefully we can stop there. All right, 8 times 1 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 3 is 24. There's my least common multiple. Didn't have to go very far with the 8, but I did with the 3. And I know some of you are like, but Miss Wilson, 3 times 8 is 24. You could have just done that. I could have in this situation. But remember the problem before? If I had done 3 times 6, I'd have 18, and my numbers would be much bigger. We don't want to do that. So I know that my least, go ahead and write it in, common multiple is 24. I'm going to circle them. They're going to be harder to circle, but we're going to do it. There we go. It's not really a circle, but that's okay. All right, there they are. Now let's write them down here. We've got our 1/3 on this line and our 5/8 on this line. So I know I want to multiply that 1/3 times something to get 24 as the denominator. I know that 3 times 8 equals 24. And I know that I have to multiply the numerator by the exact same number as the denominator. So 1 times 8 is 8. So I know that 1/3 is equal to 8/24 because all I really did is multiply 1/3 times 1 in a different form. Looks good, looks good. Let's move on to that 5/8. I know I want 24 to be my denominator. So I know that to get from 8 to 24, I'm going to multiply by 3. If I multiply the denominator by 3, I have to multiply the numerator by 3 because you have to multiply them by the same number. 5 times 3 is 15. Now, I know some of you are like, but why are we doing this? You don't know how to add 1/3 plus 5/8, but you do know how to add 8/24 plus 15/24, and that's what we're going to be doing on Monday. Let's go ahead and jump to the last 2 problems. All right. 4, we've got 2/5 and 3/4. Go ahead and write your 5 and your 4 on your T-chart. And I want you to go ahead by yourself and fill in those first few multiples. Now, let's write out our multiples. 5 times 1 is 5. 5 times 2 is 10. 5 times 3 is 15. 5 times 4 is 20. I'm going to stop there. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times 4 is 16, and 4 times 5 is 20. So I know that my least common multiple is 20. Beautiful. So let's go ahead and write our fractions in. We've got 2/5 and 3/4. And I want my denominator to be 20 because that's my least common multiple. That's the lowest denominator I can have between these 2 numbers and still be able to add them. All right, so to get from 5 to 4, I'm going to multiply by, 5 to 4 made no sense. In order to get to 5 to 20, we're going to multiply by 4. Now, if I multiply the denominator by 4, what am I going to multiply the numerator by? 4 was the correct answer. I really hope you got it. 2 times 4 is 8. Beautiful. Now, this next one, I want you to tell me what the new fraction is going to be. For this one, you should have known that in order to get from 4 to 20, we have to multiply by 5. And if I multiplied the denominator by 5, I have to multiply the numerator by 5 as well. 3 times 5 is 15. You should have gotten 15/20. So my 2 fractions are 8/20 and 15/20. These are my equivalent fractions with least common multiple denominators. For this last problem, we've got 5, 6, and 3/8. I want you to do this one completely on your own. In the answer box, I am looking for the 2 equivalent fractions. So when you're done, you're going to put your two equivalent fractions. So this is the answer that I'm looking for, but over there. Don't circle yours, but like solve the last one and put your answers in the box. For this one, you should have put your 6 and your 8 at the top of your T-chart and gone ahead and written out the multiples. So 6 times 1 is 6, 6 times 2 is 12, 6 times 3 is 18, 6 times 4 is 24. That number looks familiar. Let's see what we get with 8. 8 times 1 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 3 is 24. There's my common multiple. My least common multiple is 24. There we go. Now let's dive in and see if you got your fractions correct as well. We've got our 5/6 and our 3/8. Looks good, looks good. I know I want my denominator to be 24 because that was my least common multiple. All right, how do we get from 6 to 24? We multiply by 4, of course. And if I multiply the denominator by 4, I'm going to multiply the numerator by 4 as well. 5 times 4 is 20. Remember, you can pause the video whenever you want to check your work with mine. Your work should look just like mine. And if it doesn't, please check and see why and fix it. Now we know we want to take our 8 and turn it into a 24, so we're going to multiply by 3. And if I multiply the denominator by 3, we're going to multiply the numerator by 3, and 3 times 3 is 9. So if I look at the fractions 5/6 and 3/8, and I want to make their denominators equal, I want to make equivalent denominators, least common multiple, least common denominators. All these words are words we're going to use. But if I want to make it to where I can add and subtract those fractions, I have to find the least common multiple, make it the denominator, and make equivalent fractions. Remember, the word equivalent fractions is saying this 5/6 is equal to this 20 over 24. It's not saying 5/6 is equal to 3/8 because it's not. It's saying you're making an equivalent fraction by finding the least common multiple. I hope that made sense. If it did not, make sure you are asking lots of questions. Questions are always awesome. And if it did, you may get started on your classwork.